Margaret adjusted the collar of her navy blue blouse and checked her hair one last time in the mirror. Today was supposed to be a proud moment. After 40 years of service as a beloved school principal, she was finally retiring. She had given her life to education, teaching children, guiding teachers, and building programs from scratch. She didn't want anything fancy, just a small party with some of the old staff, a few friends, and her only son, Kevin. Kevin had insisted on planning the retirement party. "Don't stress, Mom," he'd told her a week earlier. "I've got it all handled. Just show up and enjoy yourself." That had made her smile. Over the years, Kevin had grown distant, but she thought it was just adult life and responsibilities. After all, he had a wife now, Emily, and a toddler, Henry. Margaret always told herself that he still loved her, just didn't always have time to show it. The venue was a cozy local banquet hall not far from her old school. When she entered, she was touched to see familiar faces. A few retired teachers gave her a hug. Some former students came with flowers. The decorations were modest, gold and cream balloons, a small stage, a "Congratulations, Margaret" banner. A slideshow played quietly in the background, showing photos of her with students over the years. It wasn't extravagant, but it felt warm. She was grateful. Then came the speeches. Her former vice principal shared some kind words. A student from her early days in education gave a surprise tribute. Margaret wiped her eyes a few times. And then Kevin stood up. "Mom," he began with a smile, holding a glass of champagne. "You've worked so hard for so many years. It's time to finally relax. Time to stop worrying about bills, groceries, taking care of the house, and, honestly, time to stop being alone." She smiled, a little confused, unsure where he was going. "That's why," he continued, placing a hand on her shoulder, "Emily and I made a decision. We've already signed the papers for you to move into a beautiful retirement home. Everything's taken care of. It's 5 minutes from our place. They'll help with medication, meals, laundry, so you can finally rest. You'll be safer there. And we'll visit when we can." The room went completely silent. Margaret froze. For a second, she thought it was a joke. The words didn't process all at once. A retirement home? Signed papers? When did she agree to this? Her eyes scanned the faces of the guests. Some looked confused. Others gave awkward smiles. A few older women looked visibly uncomfortable. Kevin looked proud, waiting for applause. She felt like the floor had opened beneath her. Everyone was watching. She couldn't make a scene. So she gently nodded, forced a tight smile, and stood up to thank everyone for coming. Her voice was calm, but her chest was tight. "Thank you all for celebrating this chapter of my life with me," she said softly. "I hope the next chapter is one I choose myself." No one clapped. No one laughed. Kevin looked confused by her tone. Margaret turned toward the back door of the banquet hall and walked out. Alone. The cold air outside bit through her jacket. She didn't call a taxi. She didn't ask anyone to follow. She just walked. She walked for nearly half an hour before she realized where her feet had taken her. The local park where she used to take Kevin as a child. The same bench where they used to sit, feeding ducks, still stood by the pond. She sat down slowly, her mind racing. It wasn't just the shock of being told she was being sent to a care home. It was the way he said it. So proudly. Like he'd done her a favor. Like she was some old problem he'd finally solved. Her heart felt heavier than it had in years. All those nights she stayed up helping him study, all those times she worked extra hours to buy him a new bicycle, all the birthdays where she made his favorite meals even after her husband passed. All of it, and now this. She didn't know what hurt more, that he had made this decision without her, or that he had already signed the papers and planned to move her out quietly. It felt like a betrayal disguised as kindness. And yet she didn't cry. Not yet. Her mind was spinning, trying to remember when things had started to shift. Maybe it was when Kevin asked to help manage her finances after his father died. He had said it was just temporary. "You have enough on your plate, Mom." But now she wondered if that was the beginning of his quiet takeover. The park lights flickered on as evening crept in. She finally stood up and walked home. Her house felt different that night. The walls that once held warmth now felt distant. She looked at the family photos on the wall. Her wedding picture, Kevin's graduation, little Henry's birth. Her fingers trembled as she touched the glass frames. She didn't sleep that night. Instead, she pulled out a dusty file box from her closet, the one labeled important papers. She sat at the dining table and began flipping through everything she still had access to. Her will, insurance documents, old statements. There were gaps, things missing. It was as if someone had been slowly moving her out of her own life, one signature at a time. Then she found something she didn't remember signing, a durable power of attorney form with Kevin's name on it. Her heart dropped. She stared at the signature. It was hers, but the date was unfamiliar. She didn't remember signing it. Was it during the time she had been on medication after surgery? Had he brought her a stack of papers and told her they were routine? Something inside her broke. She stood up, walked to the kitchen, made herself a cup of tea, and then calmly opened her laptop. She searched for the name of her old lawyer, Mr. Callahan. She hadn't needed him in years. But now, she needed answers. And protection. The next morning, before the sun rose, she sent an email. Urgent. I need to speak with you in person. It's about my house, my son, and my signature. And then, for the first time in months, Margaret truly smiled. Not because she was happy, but because she finally felt awake. The morning after her retirement party, Margaret sat by the window in her kitchen, holding a cup of lukewarm tea. The sun was rising, but she didn't feel its warmth. Everything felt different. The house, once filled with memories, now felt like a stranger's home. She stared at her phone, waiting for a reply to the email she had sent hours ago. At 9:12 a.m., the reply finally came. It was short and direct. Margaret, of course. Come in today at noon. Mr. Callahan. Margaret had known Mr. Callahan since her husband passed away. He had helped her with the paperwork back then, pension, insurance, the will. He was kind, efficient, and most importantly, honest. She hadn't needed him in years, but today, he was the only person she trusted. She arrived at his office 15 minutes early, wearing her best coat and holding a folder of all the documents she still had access to. As soon as she sat down in his office, her voice trembled. I think my son's trying to take everything from me. Mr. Callahan leaned forward, serious. Tell me everything, Margaret. From the beginning. She explained it all. The retirement party, Kevin's public announcement, the signed nursing home papers she had never agreed to, and the power of attorney document she didn't remember signing. Mr. Callahan carefully looked at each paper she brought. This signature looks like yours, he said. But the date, you were recovering from surgery then, weren't you? Margaret nodded. Yes. I was still on pain medication. He brought me documents to sign. He said it was just insurance stuff. Mr. Callahan frowned. If you weren't of clear mind, and if there's no legal witness noted on this, it may not hold up. He promised to investigate. He asked her for any bank documents she could access, any communication she had with Kevin about finances. Margaret felt a small wave of relief. For once, she wasn't alone in this. As she left his office, she didn't feel scared, she felt alert. Awake. She had spent years giving Kevin everything. She had cooked for him every time he visited. She had helped him with down payments, childcare, even paid off his college loans. But now, when she was supposed to enjoy the peace of retirement, he had made plans to lock her away, politely, quietly, without even asking her. She wasn't going to cry anymore. That afternoon, she started looking deeper. She pulled out an old laptop that hadn't been used in a while. It still had her old banking records. When she compared her savings from 5 years ago to now, the numbers didn't make sense. She was missing nearly $180,000. She couldn't believe her eyes. She printed everything out and added it to a new folder labeled Evidence. She also remembered something else. Months ago, Kevin had asked her to just sign a few forms while she was watching Henry. She had been distracted. It was a rushed moment. She signed without reading. Now, she wondered what exactly she had signed. She went to her bedroom closet and pulled down a locked metal box that her husband used to keep property papers in. Inside, she found a copy of her home's deed. Her heart skipped. Kevin's name had been quietly added as a co-owner. Without her realizing it. That night, she couldn't sleep again. But this time, she wasn't sad. She was focused. The next morning, she returned to Mr. Callahan's office. He had done his own digging. Margaret, he said, Kevin has been slowly draining your funds. Quietly. Legally, in some cases, because of that power of attorney. But if we can prove he misused it or got it without your full knowledge, we can challenge everything. Margaret asked, what about the house? The house is tricky, he replied, but we can argue coercion. And if he added his name by misleading you while you were unwell, we can get a forensic handwriting expert to review it. Margaret didn't hesitate. Do it. Mr. Callahan gave her a plan. First, revoke the power of attorney legally. Second, freeze her accounts. Third, prepare legal action. But he warned her, don't confront Kevin. Not yet. Let us gather everything first. Margaret agreed. She had no intention of giving Kevin a single warning. She went home and stayed silent. When Kevin called that evening to check in, she answered politely. He asked how she was feeling after the party. She smiled through the phone. Oh, I'm just getting used to the idea of slowing down, she said. Thank you again for planning it. He sounded pleased. I'll pick you up Friday for the move-in. Margaret replied, looking forward to it. She hung up and added Friday to her calendar. Not for moving, but for the day everything would begin. Over the next 2 days, she met with a financial expert who confirmed even more damage. Kevin had moved funds from her retirement savings into his wife's account. The pattern showed small amounts, moved every few months, just under the reportable limit. Enough to stay hidden, unless someone was looking. Margaret was looking now. She also found out that Kevin had taken out a small loan in her name 3 years ago. He had paid it back, but never told her. He had been practicing, testing how far he could go. Margaret wrote everything down in a notebook. She kept copies hidden in different places. If something happened to her, she wanted someone to find the truth. By Thursday, the revocation was official. Kevin no longer had legal control over her decisions. Mr. Callahan also filed a temporary freeze on the house transfer. The bank accounts were locked. Margaret changed the passwords to every online service she had. She didn't tell anyone. She just waited. Friday morning, Kevin arrived at 10 a.m. with a moving van parked across the street. His wife, Emily, followed behind in her car. Margaret stood at the front door with a calm expression. Kevin smiled. All packed? Margaret nodded slowly. Yes. Everything's ready. As Kevin stepped inside, he noticed the empty living room. Where's the furniture? Margaret looked him in the eye and said softly, gone. Emily's voice rose from outside. Why is the door to the garage locked? And where are the boxes? Margaret didn't flinch. Then Kevin's phone buzzed. Again. And again. He pulled it out. First message. Bank alert. Account temporarily frozen. Second message. Home deed dispute filed with county records. Third message. Power of attorney revoked. His eyes widened. What is this? Margaret smiled calmly. That's the sound of consequences, Kevin. He tried to raise his voice. You can't do this. I've taken care of you for years. Margaret's voice turned cold. No, Kevin. I took care of you. I paid your loans. I gave you a home. I trusted you. And you were planning to lock me away without a word. Do you really think I didn't notice? Kevin tried to speak, but no words came out. Margaret turned to close the door. I've already contacted the authorities. You'll hear from my lawyer soon. And Kevin? He looked up. She said softly, I'm not going to the home today. But you might be going somewhere. And then she shut the door. Kevin stood frozen outside his mother's front door. His face had turned pale, his hands shaking as he stared at his phone screen. One message after another popped up. Account locked, property dispute filed, attorney notifications, and worst of all. You no longer have legal control over Margaret Bennett. Emily came storming toward the porch. What is going on? She snapped. I thought everything was already handled. You said the house would be transferred by now. Margaret watched them from inside, calm and quiet, as if she were finally watching a bad play end. Kevin's voice cracked. She reversed everything. I don't know how she did it. Emily's eyes narrowed. You told me she was confused, that she wouldn't notice anything. I thought she wouldn't. Kevin snapped. She never asked questions before. Well, she's asking them now, Emily muttered, her face stiff. And if you don't fix this, Kevin, we're in trouble. That money paid for Henry's school. My name is on those transfers. Kevin couldn't speak. He just walked back to the car, defeated. Inside, Margaret stood by the window and watched them drive off. She didn't feel angry or even sad anymore. She felt clear, focused. After years of being told to sit quietly, to trust, to let others handle things, she had finally taken back control. But it wasn't over yet. That evening, she met with Mr. Callahan again. He had good news. We've got the forensic report back. That signature from the power of attorney was likely signed under medical influence. Your handwriting was shaky, inconsistent. A court will take that seriously. And the addition of Kevin's name to the house deed? It can be challenged. Margaret nodded. Let's move forward. Callahan leaned back. Margaret, are you sure? This will be public. He's your son. She met his eyes. Then he shouldn't have stolen from his mother. The next step was gathering evidence. Mr. Callahan had already started. Kevin had been sloppy. Over the past few years, he had used Margaret's money to make multiple payments. Not just for the nursing home, but for private school fees, mortgage installments on a second home, even luxury purchases like jewelry and expensive vacations. Worse, Kevin had sent casual texts to Emily like, "She doesn't even look at her statements. We're fine." Screenshots of those texts, retrieved from a backup, were now part of the legal file. Margaret also gave Callahan access to her email, where they found even more. Kevin had redirected her bank notifications to an alternate email address he had set up, just to simplify things. It was clear now that this wasn't an accident or one-time mistake. This was premeditated financial abuse. By Monday, Kevin received his first legal notice. "You are being investigated for financial elder abuse and unauthorized property control." He panicked. He tried calling Margaret. She didn't answer. He called again. And again. No reply. On the fourth attempt, she picked up. Her voice was steady. "Kevin," she said. "Don't call me again. Let your lawyer speak to mine." "But Mom, I didn't mean." She cut him off. "Don't lie, Kevin. I've seen everything. I raised you better than this. And you still chose this path." He started to cry. "Please, I was just trying to help." "No," she said. "You were trying to take." And she hung up. Kevin tried to get ahead of the storm. He spoke to Emily, begged her to deny the account transfers. But when she saw the direction things were going, she turned cold. "I'm not going down for this," she told him. "If they ask me questions, I'm telling the truth." Kevin lost it. He shouted at her, blamed her for everything. Emily packed a bag, took Henry, and left that night for her parents' house. Now Kevin was alone. The bank froze all joint accounts. The second home, which was in Emily's name, was no longer accessible to him. His employer, a financial firm, found out about the elder abuse investigation and placed him on unpaid leave pending the outcome. He was drowning. But Margaret? Margaret had never felt stronger. The legal hearing was set for 2 weeks later. Margaret was nervous but ready. Mr. Callahan had lined up everything: documents, bank logs, emails, messages, even the testimony of a nurse who had been with her during her surgery recovery and could confirm she had been medicated when the power of attorney was signed. Kevin arrived at court with a lawyer he could barely afford. He looked thinner, stressed. Emily wasn't there. Margaret didn't look at him. She sat calmly and listened as Callahan laid out the entire story. Each detail landed like a hammer. The judge asked Kevin if he had anything to say. Kevin began to cry. "I was just trying to take care of her. I thought she was lonely." The judge stared at him. "You thought taking control of her money, her home, and sending her to a facility without her consent was helping?" Kevin looked down. "I don't know what I was thinking." Margaret finally spoke. He wasn't thinking. He was planning. The courtroom fell silent. The ruling came quickly. The judge declared the power of attorney invalid due to coercion and lack of capacity. The house title change was reversed. The judge also issued a formal warning to Kevin, saying criminal charges could still be filed depending on further investigation. Outside the courtroom, Kevin tried to approach Margaret. "Mom," he said quietly. "Please. I messed up, but you're still my mother." Margaret paused. She looked at the man in front of her, not the little boy who once held her hand in grocery stores, but a grown man who had planned to steal her life out from under her. "I was your mother every day of your life," she said softly. "But you stopped being my son the moment you treated me like property." Kevin broke down, but Margaret walked past him. She didn't look back. That night, she returned home and packed a small bag. Not because she had to. Because she wanted to. She had decided to sell the house, move to a quiet apartment near the community center, and start her own life again, from scratch, on her own terms. The next morning, she made tea, opened her laptop, and typed something new into a blank document. Chapter 1: My Life. By me. It had been 6 weeks since the court hearing. Margaret was no longer living in the house where she raised Kevin. After everything that happened, she realized the house didn't feel like home anymore. Every room reminded her of how blind she had been. Every hallway echoed with Kevin's voice asking for favors. Every drawer held memories of the life she thought they shared. She didn't want to stay there and feel bitter. That wasn't who she was. So she sold it. Not out of revenge. Not to prove anything. But to start fresh. She used part of the money to move into a peaceful senior apartment complex just outside the city. It wasn't too fancy, but it had a little balcony, a reading room, and even a garden that the residents tended together. Best of all, no one there treated her like a burden. The day she moved in, the woman in the apartment next door knocked on her door with cookies and said, "Welcome. I'm Irene. If you like tea and bad mystery novels, we're going to get along just fine." Margaret laughed for the first time in days. Each day started the same. She'd wake up early, water the plants on her balcony, take a short walk around the building, then spend her morning reading or writing. She had picked up an old hobby, journaling, and was even thinking about turning her story into a short memoir, just for herself. Something to remind her of what she had survived. The apartment staff were kind. Her neighbors were warm. And most of all, for the first time in years, no one tried to control her life. One afternoon, while sitting on the bench near the garden, Irene turned to her and asked, "Do you ever see your family?" Margaret took a breath. "I used to," she said. "But now, I think I've just started seeing myself again." She didn't say more. Irene didn't press. Sometimes, silence was the kindest response. Meanwhile, Kevin's life was unraveling. After losing his job at the financial firm due to the elder abuse investigation, no reputable company would hire him. Word had spread. Even though the judge hadn't pressed criminal charges yet, the public documents were enough to ruin his reputation. He had gone from a rising manager to a man applying for minimum wage jobs, and even those weren't calling back. Emily stayed away. She told friends and family that Kevin had made decisions without her knowledge, and she was focusing on raising Henry alone. Kevin moved into a small apartment outside the city. He had sold his second car. He started delivering groceries to make ends meet. The man who once bragged about handling his mother's affairs was now just trying to survive his own. But what haunted him most wasn't the court case. It was the silence. Margaret hadn't spoken to him once since the courthouse steps. One day, Kevin received a letter. The envelope was pale yellow, hand-addressed in familiar handwriting. No return address. His heart started pounding. He opened it slowly, afraid of what he might read. Inside was a single sheet of paper. It wasn't a threat. It wasn't a warning. It was just a note. "Kevin, I raised you to be better. I gave you everything I had. And you decided that wasn't enough. You didn't lose me because of money. You lost me because you saw me as something to manage, not someone to love. Some things can be forgiven. But not this. You'll never hear from me again. You were never supposed to bury me while I was still alive. Mom." Kevin read it once. Then again. And then again. He sat at the edge of his bed and didn't move for hours. Back at the apartment, Margaret sat in the small lounge with Irene and another neighbor. They were discussing books, sipping tea, and talking about nothing important. Margaret smiled not because she had won, but because she had survived. Later that evening, she walked out to her balcony as the sun was setting. She looked at the sky and whispered, "You'd be proud of me, Thomas," speaking to her late husband. "I finally stopped letting people decide who I am." She went inside and pulled out her journal. She flipped past pages filled with dates, facts, legal notes, and court summaries until she reached a fresh page. She picked up her pen and wrote, "This is not the end of my story. This is the beginning of the part one. Write myself." And with that, she closed the book and turned on soft music. She danced just a little alone in her living room. But not lonely. Never again.